So section C, you'll notice here it says you've got to answer question 3. That's to do with food, water and energy in the UK. And then schools have a choice either to teach question 4 about food, question 5 about water, or question 6 about energy. So we've done water. So the two questions we're going to answer in section C, question 3 and question 5. So to start with question 3, we've got a figure showing the average number of food miles travelled for 3 products in the UK. You've got your bananas, strawberries and oranges. Question: by approximately how many times is the average food miles for bananas greater than that of strawberries? So basically, how many times more is 5523 than 907, roughly? And the answer is C, 6. 3.2, how does increasing food miles lead to a larger carbon footprint? A relatively straightforward question, but just to remind you, food miles is the distance that food has travelled. So all you've got to really do is think, well, how is food transported from one country to another? The two main transportation modes is either on planes or on boats. So all you've got to do is link the use of those, and if they are travelling for greater distances, they will be burning. And the key term here is fossil fuels, such as coal or oil, petrol. Therefore, greenhouse gases will be emitted, such as carbon dioxide. So just be careful of the use of the key terms there. But on the face of it, an easy question, just got to link the modes of transport to the fuel they burn, and then potentially linking that to global warming. 3.3. To what extent is it preferable to source food locally in the UK rather than import from abroad? So it's a 6-mark question. We've got this phrase again, to what extent. So basically the question is asking, how much do you agree that it is better to buy food from the UK rather than buying it or importing it from abroad? So we do have to get a bit of balance there if we want 4, 5 or 6 out of 6. But in terms of, first of all, the advantages of getting food from abroad, for the consumer's point of view, someone that buys things, in this case food, is great because you have a huge variety of food you can choose from, and you can get goods that wouldn't normally be able to be grown in this country, and you can get them all year round. Also, if we allow food to come in from abroad, potentially it can be cheaper. So things like tomatoes, very easily grown in Spain due to their climate. So as a result, they grow a lot, so it is cheaper rather than trying to grow that food locally. Also, it provides jobs in poorer countries as well, so maybe you could get that into your answer. However, there are some really good things about buying food locally. Again, like the previous question, you could focus on the idea that the food miles are reduced. So the distance the food has travelled is less, and then you can link that to sort of levels of pollution, and then you can link that to less harmful gases being produced, therefore reducing maybe an impact of global warming. Or you could say, well, actually, it is better if we help local farmers in this country rather than giving money away to big organisations, because if we buy from local farmers, then you're going to get, and it's the key term again, the multiplier effect happening, because lots of people that supply the local farmers are also going to benefit if we all start buying locally. So as long as there's some balance there, there's some pros and cons mentioned, again, you should do quite well on that. Figure 11, a graph showing sources used to generate electricity in the UK for the past sort of 30 years. They've got a graph, 3.4, you've got to use the figure to complete the paragraph. So it's a gap fill, 3 gaps, and you've got a point for each of the gaps. So the supply of electricity, what between 1985 and 2015? Looking at the options, it's either going to be fluctuated or remain steady, but as you can clearly see, from the graph here, the lines, they go up and they go down. So that change means it fluctuated. In 1985, what was the main source used to generate electricity? So as long as we read the graph correctly, have a look, 1985, which line is at the top? And that will be that one, so the red one. Read across to the key, so the answer will be coal. And then finally, by 2015, gas became the #1 source used to generate electricity. A rapid increase in the use of gas having started in which year? So go up, gas is the thick black line, a solid line. It looks like from this point here is when it actually took off. So that year there would be 1992. 2.5, give 2 reasons why the use of coal decreased or went down between 1985 and 2015. So 2 marks, one, 2 very brief reasons. So thing to remember here is burning the fossil fuel of coal gives off more greenhouse gases, more carbon dioxide than burning oil or natural gas. So that could be the first reason, due to maybe concerns about the emissions given off. Also, the price of coal goes up because there is less and less of it around. It is starting to run out. So if that happens, the price of the commodity, in this case coal, will go up. Not only that, it's becoming more and more expensive to transport coal around the world, which has the knock-on effect if people don't want to use it, just because it is so bulky compared to other sorts of energy. Finally, maybe you could say, well, in the last few years at least, there's been a big push on moving away from burning fossil fuels like coal for more renewable energies like wind turbines and solar panels. After question 3 then, you've then got a choice, either question 4, 5 or 6. So all you've got to do is you've got to shade in the circle which represents the question that you are going to answer. So remember, we are not doing 4, we are doing question number 5. So you shade in that circle, you'll then scroll down past these questions and then it will say water here. So this is our final set of questions. So study figure 13, a world map showing global access to safe water, which is this one here. Your question is a multiple choice one for 1 mark. Which continent has the lowest access to safe water? So probably without looking at the figure, you could probably guess, but let's just have a look. So basically, which continent has sort of the very light greens, or all greens in general? As we can clearly see, there is most of the green countries in Africa. So 5.1, the answer is A. 5.2, describe the distribution of countries with 100% access to safe water. So basically all we're doing is we are trying to have a look at the map and describing where the countries are that have 100% access to safe water. These countries are the ones in the darkest blue. So we've got places like Canada, you've got the vast majority of Europe, apart from Portugal at the end, and Australia and New Zealand. So, as you can see, you haven't got place names on the map, so you are going to have to know where a few of these places are. What I would do for 1 mark, I would state the general pattern. So you could say a lot of these places are in maybe what's called the northern hemisphere, anything above the equator, particularly in Europe, such as places like Germany or France or the UK. 5.3 suggests one way in which water insecurity might affect the quality of life of people. So 2 marks, but you've got to develop 1 point rather than 2 separate ones. Water insecurity is when you don't have enough water to support the people in your area. So basically, if you don't have a lot of water, how is that going to impact on your life? So you could say things like in countries in Africa, young people, particularly young females, have to walk miles to get water, which means that they will miss out on education. You can develop that point. You might say maybe if there is a lack of clean water, then that'll also lead to a lack of food, which is called food insecurity. And then develop that point, people can get malnourished and then struggle to work and produce as a result. Maybe you could link water into factories. Factories need a lot of water to sort of power things or to cool things down in the process by making steel or iron. So you could say without water you can't make things, you can't make money. Link that to what people can and cannot afford. Or finally, if there is not clean water to drink, then you might have to drink dirty water. What we looked at in lesson is this parasitic worm that can enter your body if people are swimming in water that is also contaminated with raw sewage, which can cause illnesses and potentially death if not treated. So as long as you develop 1 point, many different avenues to get full marks here. Final question is 5.4. Examine the advantages and the disadvantages of a large-scale water transfer scheme that you have studied. So although it's the last question, it's only a 6 marker, not a 9 mark one. We've got 2 water case studies. One is a very small scale example of how a charity helps an area in Ethiopia. So we don't use that one. So what we've got, our large scale water transfer scheme, is in China, and the transfer of water from one part of China to another. So briefly, you could set the scene and say, this is called the South to North Water Transfer Project. A lot of people live in the northeast of China, but it doesn't rain too much there. It rains far more in the south. So water is basically going to be transferred. So what they've basically done is they've got 3 different routes where they've got huge open pipes, and they're simply allowing water to flow through these pipes over miles and miles and miles from the south up to where lots of the people are in places like Beijing. The advantage of that is obviously there's lots of factories and industries where these people are, so the water can be used in the manufacturing industry. Also, there's a lot of people there that are farmers, so it'll be used for the agriculture, for growing crops, which obviously give people a better, key phrase, quality of life. However, the disadvantages is particularly on the central of the 3 routes. It was opened a few years ago. 300,000 people had to be moved. This is called displaced. They were moved out of the way because that pipe had to be put in place. Also, there's been lots of dams put in as well. And if you put a dam in, then often a lot of the fish in the water can't go on their natural route, which can impact on food chains and local ecosystems. Also, you've always got to consider the cost. The big disadvantage here is by putting these huge pipes in, it's already cost $79 billion, which is well more than they thought it was going to. So all you've got to do for this question is develop your points, put in a few specific names like Beijing or maybe the Yangtze River, and have a balanced argument. Don't necessarily need to make a judgment. That would be more of a 9-mark question. Once you've finished this one, you will notice that there is a final section, question 6, on energy, but you do not answer these questions. Just leave those blank.